So this episode's going to be a little bit different to the rest of the series. Reason being, I was specifically asked to do this episode just to give a little bit of, I guess, backstory to where I've come from and to where I am today. So the episode itself is called The Making of Aria, and it's pretty much just a career story, I guess, around where I started, how I got into sales in the first place, and specifically the telco industry that I'm in, and going through that for essentially 17-ish years, to the point where I was ready to start my business. So I did touch on it in one or two other episodes, but just only very briefly. So I just wanted to give a bit more of an overview to that. So hopefully there'll be a bit of value in it, and you'll see that I'm not one of those people that was just handed everything and, here's $10 million, go and build a business. Nothing like that. So look, I grew up in Sydney. I love Sydney. All my family's still in Sydney. Wanted to be a golf professional my whole life, especially when I was a teenager. I spent pretty much every weekend at the golf course, both days, long days, both days, practicing, playing, working in the pro shop and doing all of that sort of thing. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for various reasons, but look, moved to Melbourne when I was 19 years old, about 2 weeks after I turned 19. Moved to Melbourne not really knowing anybody. I knew one or two people there, and that was about it. Got into a sales position there because once I got to Melbourne, I thought, okay, shit, now I don't have mummy and daddy anymore. Now I need to actually earn some money to be able to survive. And so I went into sales. Now, my first sales job, actually, I was selling paintball, tickets to go to one of those paintball shooting places. And that was actually pretty cool. I enjoyed that job, but that company ended up going under. So we all left, and I eventually ended up, after doing a couple other little bits and pieces, like working as a waiter in a restaurant for a little while, ended up getting into a sales position, selling mobile phones, going door to door for an Optus dealer in Melbourne. And I don't know what it was with this early career, but that company folded too. So I don't know if that was my influence or not. So anyway, so that company folded, but I enjoyed it. So it was literally going door to door to businesses, trying to sell them. At the time, we only had one mobile plan, one phone that we could sell. That was it. And so, it was the experience for me, was going door to door, getting told to fuck off 500 times a day, and which is something that I think a lot of people need. It basically, not that I was thin-skinned before that, but it basically made sure that I was thick-skinned enough to handle rejection, which makes a massive difference when you're in sales, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But so that company folded, but there happened to be another company in Melbourne that not so much inherited staff from that business, but they were basically doing the same thing on a much larger scale. So I ended up going to work for this other company, doing basically the same thing, and worked myself up to being a team leader. Had a team of 4, 5, 6 sales reps under me, and I was only still 19. I would have been 20 years old at that point. So felt like I was doing quite well at that point in my career. A 20-year-old team leader, had a team. I thought I was king shit. So that was going all right, and then there was a couple of gentlemen within that organisation that was offered the opportunity to purchase another business. I wasn't one of them, but a couple of the other guys there that were really good friends of mine, and they ended up purchasing another telco business and asked me to come across and work for them. So I did that. That was only for about 6 or 7 months, and again, I enjoyed it, but I ended up moving to Queensland after that. So that was the end of my Melbourne adventures, which, look, I love Melbourne. It's still a great place, and I've got friends there, and I don't get back there so often anymore, but I do love Melbourne. I think it's a beautiful place. Went up to Queensland, and again, kind of found myself in a position. Look, I had a little bit of money saved up at that point, not a massive amount, but a little bit, and managed to get myself up to Queensland, and ended up getting a job with a Telstra dealer. And that was great. I enjoyed working for them. They were a really good company, especially to begin with. We had I was making really good money. It was retainer plus commission type role. Whereas my previous roles, for the most part, when I became a team leader in Melbourne, I did have a little bit of it. I think it was a $200 a week base, if you could call it that, and then commission on top and overrides and what have you. But going up to Queensland, that was bumped up to I can't remember if it was a $400 or $600 base, but it was around that. And then commissions again. And I was making a couple of grand a week. I was doing really, really well. And unfortunately, that organisation made a couple of changes within the company that didn't really suit. I'm trying to be nice about this. So they changed things, which, look, it's their company. They're quite well within their rights to do that. But so I ended up leaving that company and went and got a job working for a Vodafone dealer. So at this point, I'd worked for Optus dealers for 2 or 3 years while I was in Melbourne, worked for Telstra for a year, or one of their dealers for a year, and then Vodafone. So already within the first 4 or 5 years of my career, I'd had a taste of all three networks, and it was great to see how the different companies worked and internally, and it's something that I've spoken about more in my YouTube series for that business. So, but it was good getting a view from what these other companies were doing. So I was with that Vodafone dealer for 7 years, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. But I wasn't happy in Queensland at all. I didn't. That job, I was there for a long time, but I didn't really enjoy it. It was one of those positions where it's like a typical sales position, I guess. It's all about monthly targets, and I was doing quite well. I was probably hitting my target 60 to 70% of the time, and so it wasn't about that. But I just didn't enjoy the dynamic. They look, lovely people, but I just think it just wasn't. There was something about it. It just didn't feel like I was doing what I wanted to be doing. And nothing against Vodafone either. Especially, I got out just before they had the whole network collapse issue around 2010-11. So it wasn't even about that. It was, look, Vodafone were, even back then, were a solid network. There was nothing really too bad about them. I had some really good clients there, and made a lot of good friends out of that business. But I just didn't feel like I was necessarily doing what I really wanted to be doing. So, but nevertheless, that isn't actually why I left. I wasn't happy in Queensland. I had relationship issues and what have you, and I ended up moving back to Sydney after that, and spent a year driving forklifts in a warehouse that my brother was managing, which was pretty cool. It was good to get that little bit of a break. I'd been in Telco at that point roughly 10 years. It was 10 years, 2010 when I moved back to Sydney. So it was good just to get that little bit of a break and go and chill out. And I literally just cruise around on a forklift and move pallets of junk mail around a warehouse, loading trucks, unloading trucks, and this and that. And did that for about 12 months. And then from there, ended up working with a company called United Networks. They're not called that anymore. They're still around. They're doing very well, actually, but no longer called United Networks. But with a gentleman called Nick Gaddis, who I've mentioned in a couple of previous episodes. But he was amazing. So he taught me so much about business and about how to run a business, how to work with clients the right way. And it was the first time I'd been in a sales role where kind of I didn't feel like I didn't have that feeling like when I was in Queensland at Vodafone, where it just didn't feel right. It was all about do the sales no matter what. If you don't do the sales, you get bollocked and all of that. And look, we had sales targets at United, and we were doing really, really well. I take a lot of pride in my time at United. I've got so much respect and love and time for Nick and his business and what he's been able to do. But at the time I joined that business, it was literally myself, Nick, and a couple of accounts people, 2 or 3 sort of accounts provisioning type people. And we grew that business substantially to the point where they're now ASX listed, which I didn't personally have too much to do with the ASX listing side of things, but I feel like my contribution to that business and to Nick being able to take that company public the way he did was the fact that I held down the domestic side of the business. There was 2 sides to the business. There was a domestic and eventually a global side to the business, and I was able to hold down the domestic side to the business so that Nick could go and grow the global side, which eventually led to them going public. So I take great pride in that, and it taught me so much about business at that point. Of not that I was running the business, I wouldn't say that at all, but just leading a team, certain things. Look, I had my own P&L that I had to do, and all of that. So it did definitely help with when I did start a business, having that little bit of experience around that, and I'll be forever indebted to Nick and forever grateful for his teachings. And he's, to this day, look, I haven't spoken to Nick for probably 6 months, but I know I could pick up the phone and give him a call right now, and we'd have a great chat. And he's brilliant. I've got so much time for him, so much respect. So fast forward from there, I ended up moving to Perth 4 years into working for United. 4 years, that's right. I was there for 6, but 2 years over here. So I actually resigned from United Networks to move over here. I handed Nick my resignation, and he basically threw it back at me and said, set up for us in Perth. I was like, fine, more than happy with that. So I moved over here, and that all went well for a couple of years, but it just got a little bit too hard. I was still managing, or trying my best at that point to manage the team in Sydney, the sales team in Sydney from Perth, and it just got too hard. I wanted to focus on the Perth market, but I kept having to go back to Sydney and back and forth, which wasn't ideal, but look, it is what it is, and I think it was best at that point. I think Nick probably, if I asked him today, would have had the same opinion that it was probably the right time for me to move on from that business. Right for them, right for me, and again, they've done incredibly well after I left as well. So I still follow everything they do, and I couldn't be happier for the success that they're having. But so I ended up leaving there. I actually got a job working for an Optus dealer here in Perth. That opened my eyes a lot. Going from working for a company like United for 6 years, and which was so in line with how I felt business should be done. And so you've got to understand, I came from being in basically sales target mode, and short-term metrics were all that mattered for 10 years. Went to work for United for 6, and we had sales targets, and they mattered. The short-term metrics still mattered, but it was more about building relationships and having long-term clients rather than just worrying about short-term sales targets. And then I went to work for this Optus dealer, and I was very clear when I went to work with them that I had 3 interviews through the process, which was a little bit strange in and of itself. But I had the 3 interviews, and I was very clear throughout the interview process that I have very hands-on relationship with my clients. That was basically from my United days. That's how Nick taught me to be. That's how I always felt that it should have been, going back to my Vodafone days when it didn't feel right. It's the way that I always felt it should be when I was at United, that you have that relationship for the long term. So I made that very clear throughout the interview process. And what was disappointing for me was that through that process, they were very much, yes, that's fine, that's perfect, that's what we want. We want you to deal with the big clients. We want you to have that relationship with them, blah, blah, blah. What was disappointing for me was basically from day one, when I got in the door, that all turned on its head, and the expectation wasn't that I would be dealing with the large clients. It wasn't that I would be managing my clients hands-on. It was, here's your sales target this month, go and do it. And so that was disappointing, very disheartening, and I was there for 8 months, 9 months, and I didn't enjoy it. Lovely people. I got along very well with pretty well everybody there. I don't think there was anybody I could point to and say that I didn't get along with while I was there. There's been, a couple of things that have been said since I left, but it didn't feel right, and I didn't hit my sales target. And it wasn't a massive sales target; it was quite a small sales target, but I didn't hit my sales target once while I was there. It wasn't, which incidentally isn't why I left, but it wasn't. I knew that I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing. It pretty well taught me what not to do when running a telco company. There was so much from that business, especially when I can compare it to United. There was so much there that just didn't feel right. And they're very successful. They really were. I mean, they no longer exist either. There is a bit of a pattern coming here. They no longer exist either, but they were very successful. They built a business that was far bigger than what my business currently is. But it wasn't for me. The way they went about it wasn't for me. And I knew within that time that if I was ever going to work for a business because going back to United I wasn't moving back to Sydney and working in Perth for United was no longer an option. But I kind of knew at that point that if I was ever going to have a telco business or work in telco, which I love, by the way, love the industry, but the only way that I could do it and how I feel it should be done is to run my own business. So that's what I did. I left Optus. I was in a position where I recently sold a unit that I had in Sydney, so that gave me a little bit of cash flow, not a massive amount, but a little bit of cash flow to help get me through the first 6 to 12 months. That's kind of how I was looking at it. So that, they'll give you an idea. It wasn't a massive amount of cash flow that I had there, but I just figured it would get me through that first 6 to 12 months. And by that time, I would hope to have built a business that could actually sustain me going forward. And that's essentially what happened. There was, a lot of ups and downs and everything as to starting the business, and, basically what this podcast series is about. But that kind of gives you, I guess, an idea of the backstory of where I've come from in my industry. And look, there may be people with similar stories. There may be people that are completely different to that, I guess. But it's just to give a bit of a backstory to where I've come from. So I've seen both sides of telco. I've seen a number of different sides of telco where, things are done the way that I think they should be done. Things are done the complete opposite of what I think they should be done. And I guess it gave me the understanding of all the different networks. I had relationships with the different networks when I started my business, and that certainly helped as well. But it gave that outline, I guess, of what I want my business to be and what I don't want it to be. And I think that's important, because one of the key things I did when I started the business was I wrote down 2 lists. One list was, these are all the things I definitely want to do with my business, and it's not grow to $1 million or any bullshit like that. It's, the things that are important. It's basically what's in this podcast series, right? Like, get a CRM. I needed the website, business cards, phone number, blah, 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 blah. wanted to have the long-term outlook on my clients, this and that. And I also wrote down a list of all the things I didn't want the business to be. It was never going to be about sales targets. It was never going to be a business with short-term goals, short-term visions or anything like that. Like my shortest term goal that I have right now is still 11 years away. Right, it just is. That's about as short term as I think. So it was all that sort of stuff. So all the things that I did want the business to be, all the things that were important to me within the business, and all the things that I definitely didn't want the business to be. And I've pretty well stuck to that. I can't think of anything that was on that list at the beginning that isn't true today. So again, I guess I take pride in the fact that I've been true to myself in that regard, that what I wanted the business to be, it is today and more as well. So look, again, a little bit different to the rest of the series. Maybe this episode will be helpful for some of you, maybe not for others, but that's perfectly fine. I hope for those that do listen to this that it's provided some value and some context and given some indication, I guess, of where I'm coming from with the other episodes and where my mindset has come from. When I talk about things like authenticity, when I talk about things like patience and short-term goals versus long-term goals and all of that, you have a little bit more context now. I think about where that's come from and why I have the mindset that I do. So look, as always, if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below, or contact me on social media. And if there is an episode like this that you do want to a specific episode or a specific topic that you want me to cover, by all means let me know as well, and I'm more than happy to look at including that in a future episode. The one other episode I'd suggest, if you did enjoy this one, is go and check out the episode on authenticity. I think if you combine what I've said in this episode with what I say in that one, that will give you a good solid foundation of understanding exactly where I've come from and exactly why being authentic and following what you believe to be true will pay dividends for you. Again, in the long term, that's all I worry about. So look, hope you got value out of this. Enjoy it, like it, share it, let other people know, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.